Welcome back. Today we're going to do a short pilgrimage through the Elysian Audio Labs Pilgrim. So first I do want to begin by thanking HifiGo and fellow reviewer Practifile for organizing a tour of this set. I happen to be first. There will be other people reviewing this set, but I do want to thank them for organizing this and giving me a shot at it for a little bit. So this is what it looks like up close. I posted some pictures on Facebook on this one. It is a very, very attractive looking shell. Something a little different, but super well made. Very, very nice finish. It kind of has this matte shine to it. On the back, I think it does say Elysian Audio Pilgrim somewhere on there. You can't get it. Yeah, there you go. So very, very nice shell. And one thing to note about the shell, I would call this one shallow fit if we look at it this way. This will definitely hit your ear, and this needs to be a little bit deeper inside of your ear to hear the full effect of the bass. So do be aware that if it sounds a little bass light, it probably just means that this is hitting some part of your ear. Slightly adjust it. Use a tip that has a little bit more extension. Just be aware that if you aren't hearing a strong sub bass, it's probably because the fit is off. The cable, this is the 3.5 millimeter version. Nice 2-core SPC. Nothing wrong with this. That comes in 4.4 as well, but not a modular, just a normal 3.5 or a 4.4. You can choose which one you want when you order. So let's kind of jump into it. I'm not going to go unbox it. I'll let the other guys unbox it. And we'll start at what is it, kind of at the surface level. It is a hybrid set, so Elysian calls this one an LSR dynamic driver. That is liquid silicone rubber in their terminology. So something, I think it's a little custom for them, something maybe they've used on other sets. I'm not sure where the origin of it was, but I think it's a little bit different, something a little bit unique, which is always nice to see. And 3 Sonian balanced armatures, which Sonian has a really great reputation for balanced armatures, and that is no different here. These are very, very nice balanced armatures. Sound, I will call this one a sub-bassy, fun U-shape. And we'll take a quick look at the graph real quick. So, yeah, so if you are a Harman Target fan, you can't even see the Harman Target. The Harman Target basically is right behind the signature of this set, right up until about there. So very much a sub-bass focus. That's, just about touching 10 dB, 9 or 10 dB. Mid-bass tuck. Rises just a little bit earlier than what you're probably expecting from other sets. So it rises a little bit earlier and then cuts over at a lower level. And I think that's a nice signature move for them. So not as much shout, but you still get a little bit more forward, just not the shout of popping up right here. So rise a little early, cut over at a lower level, poke in a little bit more detail with a 5K, and then you ease off on the treble and roll it off in a really nice natural way. And that's kind of and I would just say it's kind of a U-shape because it's a lot of sub bass. It tried to drop and keep the mids very clean, so you don't have a lot of bleed into the mids, and then it's more of a L shape, but we'll call it a U shape. But this isn't really boosted at all. Like I said, it rises a little bit early, it rises a little bit lower, so not really a typical big treble set. This one is definitely more of a relaxed treble set. So, fun Pilgrim and why you would buy it. And I'll sort of split this into 2 different parts because I think people are going to buy it simply because of the name. This is their shot at buying an Elysian set that doesn't cost them a crazy amount of money, and it's a chance for them to buy in and hear what everyone has talked about their tuning at a lower cost. And I think all those are very valid reasons for picking this one up, and I think that is going to attract most of the people who are just curious to hear something by Elysian, and this is very affordable. So I think that is reason why, number one, you would buy it. Number two, I do think this is a very, very fun set, and I think out of the box, the engaging, fun sound, very, very nice. And those of you who may have other Elysian sets or maybe even other hybrid sets which are a little bit more serious sounding, it's always nice to have something to complement the serious with the fun. And this one I think is very fun. I think it grabs you right away with sub bass and upper mids. If you listen to Flo Rida's Low, you pretty much get a feel for exactly where this one hits you, where it engages you, right there in the sub bass and the boom and the vocals. Both of those things on that track pretty much matches where this one hits you right in your ear. Very engaging right at those points. The signature is very interesting to me. Like I said, there's a big sub bass, the mids are brought forward and early, and they kind of overlay over the bass in that way. Then the treble rolls downhill for a little no fatigue. Really not unique to Pilgrim, but the upper treble is quiet versus airy. Those of you who are airheads, you probably will notice that there is a quiet to it versus an airy to it. If you're used to air sections kind of hitting your ear in a certain way, stimulating parts of your ear that are recognizable, this will be almost the opposite. It will sound very quiet and almost like a black background in that area. And your ear in that parts of those ears will kind of be searching for where the air is, and you'll just hear a lot of quiet. You'll hear this black background. So, and I wouldn't say that's actually unique to Pilgrim, but it was noticeable to me. And does that really help the U shape without sounding too lean? And I think it actually does. I think they pulled off some pretty nice tuning there in that way. If you are super into air, it might not be for you, but as far as an overall signature and a very fun, likable, engaging, I think they actually pulled off something really special there in that way. So this one has a very much a turn it up, not going to fatigue you factor that most sets don't have. And I think people are going to buy for that. And I think that would be a third reason to buy it. The way they kind of rolled the treble downhill in a way that doesn't sound like it's overly dark, but non-fatiguing. You can turn it up. It works pretty well at lower volume. It works really high. It works really well at higher volume. Just really well-crafted end-to-end tuning. I think that's what people are buying Elysian sets for. I think they pulled that one off pretty well. But on the serious side, and I think this one is $400, there are some things to consider, especially if you are really into hybrids and you really want to hear how these Sonians work with their special dynamic driver and how all of that is a super resolving kind of set that is better than everything else that you have. And maybe it's not that type of set. Again, I would say your people are probably going to buy it for the brand. You're probably going to buy it because of the fun factor, the turn it up factor. I think all of those are going to grab you. Those of you who are into some of the finer points on hearing balanced armatures do their thing, that's maybe not the tuning here. And I think the signature works against really micro details and textures and hearing those parts of tracks that you haven't heard before, or you should hear on a $400 hybrid. There's just a lot of sub bass, there's a mid bass tuck, and there's a quiet upper treble that really all mask different parts of music and sound. And I think the signature itself, again, as I'll kind of keep on saying, is very fun. But if you actually get into how do you deal with that much sub bass and still have airiness to the treble, how do you pull out the depth with the mid bass is tucked like that? Really, really hard to do some parts that reviewers tend to look at and grade hybrids on and how resolving they are. And the signature itself sort of works against a lot of those things. And again, it's just a very fun sound. But as far as emphasizing the points that you might be buying an expensive hybrid for, hybrids that do more than what your dynamic drivers do or your 1+1s or 1+2s, and you're looking for something super resolving, that's not exactly where this signature works well. So what you have here are really a fun, clear mids. But if you listen to the parts that are between the notes, all the reverb and the decays and the room acoustics, all those things are just harder to hear because there's a lot of sub bass and the upper treble. I guess that air area again. If you're really used to hearing that, it's really hard to kind of wrap your head around and how it works with the stage. Hearing how this quiet version of upper treble works, very different. I wouldn't say it's good or bad. I think it's just a preference. Certainly other sets have done it, but if this is what you were kind of looking for, then it's not really that type of set either. That upper treble level is just going to be tough with that much sub bass, like I just said. Bassier tracks will really pull the stage inward. Kind of the mids actually take kind of an inward lean to it as well. And really think about the whole CD or the whole album from Adele, like 25. Lots of those tracks, feature her voice in front of bassier drums or even bass parts, lower end parts. And I think that's where the signature has kind of a tougher time because there's so much sub bass in the background. And then you push the mids forward over them. So yes, they do overlay over them nicely, but the two don't necessarily work together in a super resolving hybrid way. You're sort of having the bass pushed forward and you're having her voice pushed forward, and it's not as natural as it should be. And for me, I sort of prefer that lower staged bass. So her voice isn't fighting all the sub bass in the back, but the sub bass ends up lower in the stage, and you have this very clear version and imaging of her voice right in the center stage. And Some other hybrids do that well. I think Cadenza 4 was actually one that does that very, very well. I think Dust does that very well. Just two different styles and approaches to doing mids and how they are presented. And this one is, I would say it's definitely really good for flow ride and low, but not as much for Adele. So the bass, again, it's absolutely a fun dynamic driver if you like a lot of sub bass, if you like more of a glide or a transition from sub to mid or more impact. It's not really that style. It's very much a sub bass focus like we saw on the graph. It's a very nice driver and people are going to buy it just for that boom. If you don't get the boom, like I said, probably means you have the wrong tips or you need to push it in a little bit farther. And, just a normal disclaimer that I probably should have mentioned right at the beginning. So I like boom, but at this price point with Sony imbalanced armatures, I would prefer a little less boom. You're paying a pretty nice price for such a beautiful set. It's got a very nice dynamic driver that has some really nice boom to it, but it also has 3 Sonians, which are beautiful and very resolving in their own way and very natural. And I sort of prefer the balance between the two. And this is very much more of a fun style, a sub-bass style, as opposed to really trying to bring out the best in the balanced armatures. They're certainly there, and they certainly bring out Adele's voice and sort of push it forward in front of the bass and all that stuff. But yeah, I think it's just kind of an interesting mix for me I would prefer a fun style at a cheaper price. And when I'm paying this kind of money for a set, I tend to look for more serious style, more attention to the micro details and the textures and the things that I can't get at more affordable sets. But like I said, if you look at the graph, the 20 hertz to about 1K very much follows the Harman target if you're into that as well. And then on the mids, again, a lot of these things I already talked about, but there are all these contributions to the mids. There's just a lot of sub bass, so you can catch the lower mids falling a little bit backwards. To counter that by the upper mid rising a little bit early, not as high to cause shout. I think he pulled that off really well. Then you poke in that 5K for a little more detail and presence. So that U-shape really kind of bounces between the sub bass and about 5K. And that's why I say it sounds very clear and very detailed, but if you're trying to hear the details, it's actually kind of harder. And it's very hard to describe that. But again, I'll go back to people who listen to the reverbs and the decays and the room acoustics, the things that happen in between the notes, those smaller things that get more resolving when you have a little bit more fuller mids and more air. All those things become a lot easier to hear, and on here really kind of hard to hear, but they're sort of there, but just hard to hear. But I will say that the strategic use of these levels and how he pulled off the sub bass and the lower rise, the early rise, the 5K, the treble, all that stuff was very strategic and probably about as good as it gets as far as implementing a tuning like that. Very, very well done. I got no complaints. I mean, you can argue whether the signature is perfect for your music and library and all that stuff, but as far as the execution of that signature, very, very well done. So treble, very much that lower heavy like I talked about, starts to head downhill about 5K. Not as airy, but that really has other advantages. That lack of fatigue, the lack of sibilance, that lack of BA timbre, those guys who like to turn it up, that turn it up factor on a really nice executed dynamic driver and really nice balanced armatures. You just don't find that every day, and this one kind of nailed that turn it up style very well. But and again, it feels very strategic and intentional on the treble style, how it's so lower heavy and not as much in the upper. But if you are into the air and the top shine and the top dynamics, just harder to hear. All those things that tend to put you in the room, right? Those things that make you trick your brain into feeling that you're in the studio or in the box with Adele. Those things are harder to hear, but the rest of it, I think, done quite well. And then stage, you can probably guess. I think the sub bass and the treble balance, the little not as much air, that quiet version of upper treble, those two things kind of conspire to make it sound a little bit smaller. It definitely has a in your head but spacious 3D feel to it. It's definitely not flat because of the upper mid was very well done. Like I said, rise a little bit early, rise lower. That works out very well as to keeping the 3D-ness of the stage. But sort of missing the higher upper treble that would have actually expanded the stage and the top dynamics that kind of gives you. It makes a overall better projection. So those things are kind of off. But, the more sub bass you have in a track, the more it sort of pulls inward. So again, very much for people who are looking for fun as opposed to people who are looking for soundstage and imaging and textures and micro details, all those things that you may have in other sets. I think this is the one that complements all of those other things. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.